Daddy, is she pretty? Alexander smiled. Just 5 minutes earlier, a huge weight had lifted from his shoulders. He had spent a week agonizing over telling his daughter that he planned to marry. His fiancée was due to arrive in a month. Sophie was a bright girl. Sometimes her reasoning could put an adult to shame. Even Alexander, a businessman, often found himself stumped by his daughter's questions or decisions. Of course, she's very beautiful, and you'll definitely become friends. She'll teach you all sorts of things. What do you girls do? What to wear with what? What to use to put on makeup? Sophie laughed. Oh, Dad, don't even go there. Your ideas are just too funny. Alexander burst out laughing. Of course, his 8-year-old daughter was nothing less than a fashion trendsetter among her friends. Sometimes he would raise an eyebrow at how his daughter was dressed, but he tried to hold back. Yet, when her friends would excitedly flock around Sophie, and their mothers would ask who dressed her, he'd look at his daughter with completely different eyes. Sophie was always a step ahead, no matter the situation. Sometimes Alexander wondered if this was because he spent so little time with her. She was a serious girl. When her dad wasn't around, she'd read, draw, or craft things. Even her nanny, who had been with them for 6 years, always spoke of her with admiration. I've never had a child like her. You understand? You don't even need to teach her anything. Just explain it once, and Sophie understands any topic perfectly. And the way she recites poetry, you wouldn't believe it. It's as if she wrote them herself and perfectly understands who they were written for and why every single word was chosen. Alex, of course, was proud, but he knew his contribution was minimal. He was rarely home. Sophie was always with her nanny or with Natalie, the housekeeper. He did try, of course. They would go on vacations together, and how Sophie would beam then. She wouldn't let him out of her sight, and he was happy for it. He wouldn't even bring his laptop, because spending time with his daughter brought him true joy. Daddy, when will she arrive? Well, in about a month. And what's her name? Alice. Dad, I'm definitely going to think of a surprise for her. Do that, sophomore. I'm so glad you've taken this so well. I was afraid you'd be against it. Sophie looked at him seriously. No, Dad, I understand. There needs to be a woman in the house. Alex was taken aback. What was he supposed to say to that? Fortunately, his phone rang, saving him. Sophie waved cheerfully and disappeared into the house. She already knew what surprise, a pleasant one. Of course, she would prepare for her dad's future wife. She would learn her language. Of course, it was impossible to learn everything in a month, but she was a capable girl, and she would try her best to learn at least the most common words and phrases. She immediately called her former nanny, with whom she still kept in touch. She explained what she needed, and the nanny promised to help. Alexander drove to the office, contemplating how unpredictable life was. When Helen died 6 months earlier, he thought his life was over, that only darkness lay ahead. It was Helen's mother who pulled him out of that state. She was grieving, yet she didn't leave Sophie's side for a second. But he saw and heard no one. One day, his mother-in-law walked into his study, where he was nursing a cognac in front of Helen's photograph. He had been doing this for 2 weeks already. She swept everything off the desk, placed Sophie's bassinet there, and said, "Are you an egoist? No, you're worse than that. You're a beast. I don't think Helen would be happy to see how you love your daughter, and how you care for her. You're grieving, and you can't do anything. But I've lost a daughter, the only daughter whom no one will ever replace for me. Yet I'm here with Sophie. And you're a weakling. This is your daughter. I'm leaving. I'll be back in a week." And she simply walked out. For a while, Alex sat, dumbfounded, staring at Sophie. She stared back at him with wide eyes. A minute or two passed. Then the baby wrinkled her nose, then her lips, and a loud wail erupted. Alex jumped up, flustered. His mother-in-law had just left, and he had asked the housekeeper to take a vacation. For an hour, he paced, carrying Sophie in his arms. He then noticed a note on the table. His mother-in-law had written down feeding times for the baby, what to wash her with, how to change her. Essentially, a mini instruction manual. And Alex, forgetting his grief, rushed about, rocked, mixed formula, pureed fruits. He came to his senses. A few days later, when he automatically changed a diaper, fed Sophie, and realized it had taken him no more than 15 minutes in total, he smiled at his daughter. "Don't worry, we'll get through this." A week passed, then another. His mother-in-law didn't return. So Alex went to her house himself. The door was locked. A neighbor told him she had been taken to the hospital with a heart attack. Alex wanted to scream, to demand why he hadn't been called, but then he remembered his broken phone, left on the road near the cemetery, which he hadn't thought about since. At the hospital, he heard what he had feared most in the world. He buried Lydia next to Helen, then sat by their graves. "Thank you for holding on and for setting me straight. I promise, for Sophie's sake, I'll do everything. She will be the happiest girl." Over the next 7 years, he rebuilt a company he had bought for next to nothing, and now he was not just wealthy, but considered one of the most successful. At the office, he was met by Rita. Rita was his right hand, his assistant. She had once been Helen's friend, and they had been quite close. Now, that level of closeness was gone, of course, though Rita was still considered a family friend. She was also Sophie's godmother, and she loved her very much. "Alex, I've booked your fiancée's ticket. The plane arrives on the 1st at 5 p.m. "Excellent. Thank you, Rita." "Alex, how did Sophie take the news?" Alex was irked by Rita's question, and he replied rather unfriendly, "Why do you ask?" Rita sighed. "Sorry." She started to leave, and Alex realized he'd overstepped. "Forgive me, Rita." She took it well. "I even think she was pleased." Rita smiled warmly. "Sophie is a good, kind girl. I hope they become friends." Did he imagine it? Or did Rita say that with a hint of sadness? No, he must have imagined it. Rita left, and Alex plunged back into his work. That evening, Alice called. They talked for a bit, and then she asked, "Alex, where does your daughter study?" "What do you mean, where?" "At the Lyceum." "Why? Don't you think your child needs a good education and should be sent abroad?" "Alice, let's agree on something. You're never to say anything like that to me again." Silence hung on the other end of the line. Then the woman softly said, "I'm sorry. I just thought it was worth worrying about the girl's future." Alex thought that everyone seemed to be worrying about Sophie today, as if he himself wasn't capable of giving his daughter everything she needed. He had seen Sophie poring over books or sitting with headphones on for a whole month. He already knew she was learning French. He smiled to himself. Alice would surely appreciate it, but he said nothing to his fiancée. It was Sophie's surprise, after all, especially since Alice spoke Russian perfectly, even though she had always lived abroad. Her parents had moved there when she was only 2. That was, in essence, all he knew about Alice. He also knew she owned a chain of small shoe stores that were currently struggling. Of course, he would help her, investing as much as she needed, but only after the wedding. In fact, he'd first suggest selling them and opening similar stores here. They would be living here, after all. Sophie volunteered to meet Alice with him. The young woman hadn't forgotten the girl and brought her a set of children's French perfumes, which caused wild delight. Alex exhaled with relief, deciding that everything seemed to be in order. From the very beginning of his acquaintance with Alice, he had constantly worried about how they would get along. The truth was, Alice didn't seem to be very fond of children. He had realized this from a conversation she had with a friend. The friend had invited her somewhere, and Alice had asked if children would be there. When she found out they would, she said she would decline the invitation. She hung up the phone, and Alex asked with interest, "You don't like children?" Alice shrugged. "More like, I'm neutral towards them and try to keep my distance." They had met 2 days ago and had just left their hotel room for the first time to finally get something to eat. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. I have a daughter." Alice squinted. "Perhaps you have a wife too?" Alex sighed. "No, no wife. She died many years ago." Alice immediately placed her hand on his. "Please, forgive me, I didn't know." There was so much genuine tenderness in her voice that Alex simply nodded. At least she didn't lie. She spoke as things were. Alice entered his life swiftly and completely. Soon, Alex couldn't imagine how he had lived without her before. She was so beautiful, so intelligent, so utterly perfect. At home, a beautifully set table awaited them. Alice raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Aren't we going to a restaurant?" Alex chuckled. "No restaurant could even come close to our Natalie's cooking. Of course, we'll go, but not tonight. Tonight, we're having a family evening. Just you, Sophie, and me." Alice smiled. "You're right. And I'm too tired for restaurants. Home is definitely better." The next day, Alexander left for work. Sophie was preparing, rehearsing everything one more time. Just then, Alice came into the living room. She was talking on the phone, speaking in French. It was clear she was confident no one understood her. Sophie, as she began to grasp what was being said, immediately turned away and buried herself in her book, frantically translating the familiar words. When Alice disappeared into the bedroom, the girl dashed to her own room. Rita, Rita, I need your help. What's wrong, dear? Rita, you have to come and take me to Dad. Just make sure he doesn't know. I need to talk to him at work. But what happened, Sophie? Please just come. 15 minutes later, Sophie was already sitting in Rita's car. The girl was intently writing something on a piece of paper, then searching for something on her phone. Soph, what happened? Did someone hurt you? She looked at her godmother with wide eyes. No, not me. But they want to hurt Dad. Alex nearly fell off his chair when he saw Rita and Sophie. I don't understand. What is my daughter doing here? How did you even get here, and why? Rita, can you explain this to me? And you'd better do it fast, or I'll get angry. Rita said, you can be angry later. For now, just listen to your daughter, and don't be like those characters in TV shows who say children just make things up. Alex was stunned. Rita had never spoken in that tone, and Sophie was still writing something. Finally, she looked up. It's ready. What's ready? The translation. Alice was talking on the phone. I translated almost everything. There were just a few unfamiliar words. Alex leaned in. Interesting, which ones? Look, this word means weak poison. And this means petty. Alex took the paper from her hands, then looked at his daughter. Now tell me everything. Alex paced his office. This just can't be. Alice was on the phone with her husband. He was urging her to give Alexander something to drink, so he would sign the papers transferring money to her company as soon as possible. And Alice had no intention of marrying him because she was already married. It couldn't be. But right now, his security team was investigating Alice. An hour later, the report was on his desk. Alice did have a husband, her second, in fact, and she had children from her first marriage who lived with her first husband's mother. Alice didn't even visit them. And there were debts. Debts so large that all of Alex's funds would be needed to clear them. The debts, it turned out, were because Alice and her husband were gamblers. Alex slammed his fist on the table. I'll kill them. A week later, he and Sophie sat across from each other. He had sent Alice home that very day, quietly telling her, if you don't leave, I'll bury you. The woman was smart. She understood quickly. Dad, what? Dad, didn't you forget something? Alex frowned. What else could it be? My head already hurts. Then it struck him. It was Sophie's birthday today. The doorbell rang, and Alex rushed towards it, his mind racing to figure out what to do. At the door stood an enormous pink teddy bear, and behind it, Rita with bags. Alex whispered, Rita, I forgot. She mouthed back, I figured. We'll say it was planned all along. Sophie was overjoyed. She twirled with the teddy bear in a slow dance. She had never received a life-size doll before. And what wonderful gifts her dad and godmother had given her. As she drifted off to sleep, the girl whispered, it would be so nice if Rita lived with us. Alex looked at Sophie in surprise, then went out. He watched Rita for a long time before he couldn't hold back any longer. Rita, why aren't you married anyway? She immediately blushed. It doesn't matter.